Today on Living History, we're speaking with Roberta Lipson of United Family Healthcare.
Very shortly after we opened, a Chinese couple came in. We tried to politely say, it's quite costly, are you sure? They said, absolutely, this is our third pregnancy, and the first two didn't go well. They said, no problem about the payment, and they brought a whole suitcase of cash to pay. And the woman did deliver quite prematurely, and the baby came out very healthy.
I'm really excited today because we are speaking with a real healthcare pioneer today. Roberta Lipson built the first foreign-invested hospitals in China, and through her United Family Hospitals, she has touched thousands and thousands of lives. Roberta initially came to China in 1979 and founded Chindex, a medical equipment importer. And in her over 40 years of experience in China, she has won countless awards. Among them, the Brandeis University Asper Award for Entrepreneurship, the ACE Award for Corporate Excellence from the US State Department, and the Great Wall Friendship Award by the government of Beijing. We are very fortunate to speak to her about her early days in China today. Roberta Lipson, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be able to share some of the amazing experiences I've had over the last 40 years. So I arrived in China in 1979, and it was a very different place than it is today, and different in all aspects. But one aspect that I focused on was healthcare. And at the time, it was very poignant to me that Chinese doctors were doing their job with very, very little technical support in terms of diagnostic equipment or tools of surgery or anything basically newer than 1940-something. And so I saw an opportunity to be able to bring some of the updates and newest medical technology from the West to share with Chinese doctors. And it was so needed and so appreciated that even for the 24-year-old woman that I was, it was an opportunity that was not difficult to get started in. And so I met another young American woman here in 1980, and together we decided to start Chindex. And Chindex mainly was importing medical equipment, but also almost anything else that was needed for the reinvigoration of development in China that the government thought they needed. And we saw also an opportunity to import some concepts and ideas that would actually change the patient experience and change a new innovative platform for delivering healthcare in China. So in the early 90s, we began talking to the Chinese government about what they needed and what we could offer, and found that there was a confluence of interests in being able to offer international standard healthcare so people from around the world could feel comfortable coming to China, investing in China, because they needed to make sure their needs for their children's education were filled, but also the needs for safety and healthcare were also available. So when we found that intersection of common interests, we were given permission to open our first hospital, which we did in 1997.
Oh, actually, I have a picture from these early days on me. Maybe tell us a bit about them.
Oh, okay. So 10 years in and out of Chinese hospitals, we were being able to observe where the opportunities for improvement were for patient experience. And in about 1991, I accompanied a Chinese friend to a pretty famous large Chinese maternity hospital when she was getting ready to deliver her child. The hospitals at that time were very, very overwhelmed because there was a big birth boom in the early 90s, and there was a shortage of beds. So my friend relied on some of my relationships in the hospital to get a bed in this really wonderful, famous hospital. And when it came time for her to deliver, my husband and I accompanied her. And we got to sort of see the experience of childbirth from a local Chinese person's eyes. And it was a rather cold and unfriendly experience. And not to blame the providers, but they were quite overwhelmed with many deliveries happening at the same time and insufficient facilities. And it was very sad for me to see that such a joyous moment in a person's life, in a family's life, that the experience itself was quite cold and quite painful and quite lonely for the woman, because her husband was not allowed to accompany her, and the caregivers were overwhelmed with too many people, so that their empathy wasn't quite fully available. And then shortly after, I returned to the US to deliver my own child. I didn't do it in China because I didn't want to have that experience. And I was able to have such a joyous and wonderful experience, despite the fact that I didn't have an easy labor. But the system was just so different, and it was an opportunity for family celebration and participation, and it felt safe, it felt comfortable, and it felt joyous. And that sort of sealed the deal for me that we needed to bring some new concepts in healthcare delivery to China. And coming back from that first child delivery in the US, I began working in earnest on getting permission to open a hospital in Beijing. So then I was pregnant with my second child, and we were still working on opening a hospital in Beijing. And then I was pregnant with my third child, I believe. Oh, that might have been, actually, then I was pregnant with my second child, and we finally got permission to sign this joint venture. And that picture is me in probably my 8th month of pregnancy with my second child, signing the joint venture agreement, with high hopes that by the time it was ready for my third delivery, our hospital would be open, but unfortunately we just missed that opportunity. But it was a very joyous day. I'm sure I was just getting ready to leave back to the States for delivering that baby, and finally the deal came through, and we were signing the agreement to open the first United Family Hospital. That was 1995 or late 94. We didn't actually finish building and opening the hospital until 1997. It was very difficult because in those days, everything had to be imported. Not only did everything have to be imported, but because there weren't really any foreign invested hospitals in China to date, the whole process of approvals had to be basically developed by us and our government counterparts. And it involved very many different government agencies. So to open our first hospital, we had to get over 180 official stamps from different agencies. And every stamp had a story behind it. None of it was straightforward. So it took quite a while, not only to get all of the final approvals, but also to design and build and equip the hospital, because everything down to the bathroom fixtures had to be imported at the time.
What was it like to open a hospital in China as a foreigner? How did you work together with people to get the permission?
Well, we finally got our first breakthrough when we realized it wasn't only about what was good for us or what the investment would bring to China, but when we realized is that from the Chinese government's perspective, what we could offer was a platform that would make other investors comfortable with their investment. So it was a matter of envisioning what was important to the person that was giving the approval to allow them to take the risk of giving foreign investors such an approval. And even some of the smaller approvals that we had to get, it was a matter of making the government officials comfortable with the fact that we were going to provide a safe environment for healthcare and that they were not going to be at risk. It was very time consuming. And every one of those stops were a bit of an education for me as well.
Many of the people you worked with had previously worked in a state-run healthcare system.
Right.
It must have been really new to them as well.
Yeah, well, one of the biggest challenges for us at the beginning of opening our first hospital was how to convince Chinese doctors to throw away their iron rice bowl and come to this interesting new experiment and work with us to bring a new approach or a new flavor of healthcare to China. At the same time, we wanted to bring international talent and wanted foreign doctors to be able to come as well to share their experience with Chinese colleagues and to have this melding of medical cultures. And we had to then convince Western doctors in the middle of their career, earning fine money, to give up the comfort of their environment to come and do this experiment with us in a place that at the time was still rather unknown to the West.
How would you go about convincing Chinese doctors to join you in the early days?
Well, I think that fairly enough, there was concern of was there sufficient stability? Because once you're in the Chinese system, it's basically, unless you really, really screw up, it's a job for life. And there was, at the time it was called Shanghai, going into the deep ocean, which is a risky thing to do if you're on very firm and solid land, even if that firm and solid land might have some rocks under your feet or not be all that comfortable for one reason or another. To then dive into the deep ocean, which was quite unknown, was a big challenge for people. But I think we were passionate enough about our mission and having also built a great deal of credibility in the previous 10 years by providing these medical experts with new tools that help them do their work better. And at the time also, there were Chinese doctors were going abroad in great numbers to get experience in the West. And as they came back, they kind of, increasing numbers after a while, were able to buy into our mission because they saw a different style of healthcare and wanted to be able to practice in that kind of environment.
Yeah. Memorable experiences with patients, with Chinese patients, for instance, to whom it was also very new.
Yes.
Trust the Western hospital.
Yes, very interestingly, shortly after we opened, we really were not sure how our services would be accepted by most Chinese people. We felt quite confident that there was a great deal of demand in the international community, but we didn't know about how Chinese patients would accept paying for healthcare, first and foremost, and second of all, our very different approach to healthcare. And very shortly after we opened, a Chinese couple came in. The woman was quite pregnant, and they said, "We're here to deliver our child." And we said, okay. We didn't want to be insulting, but at the time, it was a lot to expect that Chinese people wanted to pay what we charged for that service. And they looked like they had been traveling a while. They just got off a train from Shandong. And we tried to politely say, it's quite costly, are you sure? They said, absolutely, this is our third pregnancy, and the first two didn't go well. Our first two pregnancies ended unhappily with very premature births, and the children didn't make it. But we've heard that you have an international standard neonatal intensive care, and we believe that we might have a better chance of a successful delivery and having a healthy baby if we deliver here. And they said, no problem about the payment, and they brought a whole suitcase of cash to pay. And in fact, they stayed in Beijing. The woman did deliver quite prematurely, and the baby stayed in the neonatal intensive care unit for a few months and came out very healthy. Just recently, I ran into another woman, and she also delivered her baby very, very early, like 5 months. And it was the smallest baby that we've ever had in our hospital, a bit over 500 grams. And this amazing woman, who's actually quite an accomplished artist, stayed with her baby in the hospital, actually rented a room in the hospital. Six months that baby stayed in the hospital, but now is a healthy, happy, really smart, lively 12-year-old. So we have, as a memory, that baby's footprint when the baby was born, and when he left the hospital. We have that up on our wall because it's something we're so proud of. And running into the mom after all of these years made me so happy and so proud. And more recently during COVID, we had some really wonderful opportunities to help people that really needed help. So many of the public hospitals during COVID were either closed or very limited in the services that they could provide. And we were lucky enough to have the opportunity and doctors and nurses who were willing to push through to deliver all kinds of services despite the challenges of COVID. So we had people traveling from other cities who couldn't get their continuity of their cancer therapy because they couldn't get access to hospitals, or even people. I remember one case, a person who had a heart attack and had to come from Tianjin because there were no closer options. One 86-year-old woman who came with her daughter, and it was right at the beginning of COVID, and many hospitals were closed, could not get her mom admitted anywhere, and she ended up in our ICU and was just so grateful to have someplace where she could get care.
One of the things that I noticed here in this picture is that it's very even. This is an even picture between men, women, Chinese, and foreigners.
Yes.
That says to me, you're not just another white, male, foreign-run company. Maybe talk to me about that.
Right. Thank you. I love to talk about diversity as having been one of the secrets of our success. So when we started our company, as I said, in the early 80s, we were a beautiful mix. The two founders, female American, but we had probably equal numbers of young Americans and young Chinese people as our early staff, and probably pretty equal numbers of male to female. By the time we started our hospital, because the founders were women and many of our early colleagues were women, and nursing profession is predominantly female in China, and medical profession, doctors, probably have more female representation in China than many other professions. For many years, we were heavily female dominated, but very proud because not only do our customers come from also over 120 different countries documented, our staff, we have representation both from Western countries, from Europe, from the US, from South America, Japan, Hong Kong, and it's truly a blessing because people come with the best of their medical traditions, the best of their management traditions, and I think it's a real opportunity for fomenting new ideas and bringing together ideas from all over the world, bringing together male and female perspective, bringing together people with management training background, medical training background, research, more recently IT and artificial intelligence. And I think this melting pot of different backgrounds and ideas has allowed us to stay fresh and to keep innovating.
You've been here very long, since 1979, right?
Yes.
How have these experiences with people who grew up differently than you both changed you, and what changes have you seen in people that you worked with, that you touched?
Wow, that's one of the huge benefits, and probably one of the things that attracted me to leave my home on the other side of the world and come to a completely new and different culture. Of course, I had spent a number of years studying Chinese history and Chinese language before I got here, but actually coming to Beijing in that time was an amazing eye-opener for me. And I realized very early on that the world needed to be looked at through others' eyes, as well as one's own, to have perspective. And I felt that being able to be here at that time, collaborate with Chinese colleagues and customers, and being able to look at the world and their needs and through their eyes was a blessing for me and an opportunity for growth and understanding. And I think at the same time, I felt like I was delivering a similar opportunity to my Chinese colleagues, that I could present a different perspective for them. And, you know, sometimes I see people sitting in their own bubble with their own limited source of media, sometimes because that's all that's available, or sometimes even in America through people's own choice, that their inputs come from limited sources. And I've learned over these years how important it is to try to view the world from others' perspective and put that together. That doesn't mean leave your own perspective behind, but it means use that to supplement your understanding and perhaps to come up with a new understanding based on both perspectives.
Back in the years when we were thinking of, 1990, 1995, life in Beijing was very different from life in New York City or Los Angeles, right?
Yes.
If you were talking to a Western doctor who came from an environment like that and was considering coming to Beijing, what were the usual conversations that we would have?
Well, I would always share our mission that, you know, international standard evidence-based healthcare was something that was only begun to happen in China, and coming and working with us was an opportunity of demonstrating a whole different approach and maybe impacting healthcare for the world's most populous country. And the great thing was that the people that chose to accept my invitation were people that could also be passionate about that mission. And same for our Chinese colleagues that joined us. They were taking a big leap too. And so the ones that were really willing to take that leap were the ones that were able to be passionate about our mission.
At this point, we would like to take a moment to tell you about our project. The period between China's opening in 1979 under Deng Xiaoping and the 2010 Shanghai Expo deserves to be remembered. We want to collect the memories that Chinese, Americans, and other foreigners made together during these times. We hope you will subscribe to our channel to see many more interviews like this one in the coming weeks. If you too have a story that you think needs to be remembered, we would very much like to hear from you. And we would like to thank the U.S. Consulate in Shanghai for their generous support. Without their sponsorship, we would not have been able to start this channel.
Who was the first doctor, the first Chinese doctor?
The first Chinese doctor was actually Dr. Deng Xiaoping of blessed memory. She was my prenatal doctor at PUMC. She had just come back from several years in the States at Ohio State University and had the opportunity to see what healthcare was like in a different environment and delivered in a different way. And I was so relieved to find her to be my provider, but she was a little disappointed having just come back from the West and having so many ideas that she wanted to implement, but found it quite difficult to implement in the public system in her original workplace. And I said, don't worry, don't go away. We have this new idea. We're going to open a hospital that will be international standard, and you'll be able to share all these ideas with your Chinese colleagues. So Dr. Bian was one of our first supporters and gave me confidence that this thing may be doable. It was a crazy idea, but may be doable, and helped us to find champions in the Chinese government. And Dr. Bian was with us as a consultant through the whole development stage and became our honorary hospital president in our first hospital, and continued to practice part-time here even after her retirement from the public system. And we all feel blessed to have benefited from her wisdom and knowledge and adventurousness. So yes, that was Dr. Bian Xuming. All the Chinese colleagues came from the public system, and they were so dedicated and worked so hard with insufficient tools and very heavy workloads. And so when they came here, they were able to practice in an environment that allowed them to give full attention and sufficient time to every one of the patients. And so those really experienced, competent doctors who now had a wonderful environment and sufficient time to spend with their patients became even better than they were before. So.
You just mentioned insufficient tools, and I wonder, if you were a first foreign hospital really to open up, there must have been a lot of regulation not even existing at the time. What was that like?
Right, so there's a famous Chinese expression, cross the river by feeling the stones. And for us, in our developing our first hospital, and for the regulators who were responsible to approve what we were doing, it was kind of a new experience, and we were all trying to figure out what was the appropriate path. So it gave us confidence then in subsequent going to different cities and building hospitals elsewhere, that even if the infrastructure for what we wanted to do, either from a regulatory perspective or infrastructure, didn't exist, if we could convince local partners and the local officialdom that our mission was worthy, together we could always figure out a way to go forward.
Give me one of those examples.
So originally, healthcare, foreign invested hospitals, till this day, cannot be wholly owned foreign enterprises. You have to have a 30%. There have been times when you could have 10%. There have been times when some of our facilities actually are 100% foreign owned. But at the time, we needed to have a local partner that had at least a 10% stake in the hospital. And it was very difficult because there were no real private enterprises around. And so we needed to have basically some kind of state-owned partner. And we decided that perhaps it was a nice idea to talk to PUMC, the Peking Union Medical College, by many known as the best public hospital in China, to be our partner. And we started talking to them, and we had some champions. In fact, Dr. Bian came from that hospital. And they brought it to their executive meeting for approval, whether they wanted to partner with us in this program or not. And it didn't pass. They decided that it was too risky, or for whatever reason, they didn't agree to partner with us. And we were really disappointed. And then the Chinese Academy of Medical Sciences said, okay, they don't want to do it. We can do it through one of our affiliated companies. And till this day, that they're our partner here in Beijing. And so the Chinese Academy of Medical Science doesn't actually directly operate facilities, although some of the best hospitals in China report to them, like PUMC and like Fuwai and like the Cancer Institute. But they don't actually operate those hospitals. And so having them as our partner ended up being a huge blessing, because I think if we partnered with PUMC, with the actual operating hospital, we were so small and they're so dominant that we would have never been able to blossom in who we wanted to be, we would have had to really fit their mold. So that was a really good thing that happened. Another thing I can share, you asked about was it difficult to import the pharmaceuticals you needed. It's always been somewhat of a frustration of ours that Chinese pharmaceutical approvals tend to lag behind the West. Just as the doctors were overwhelmed with work, the FDA has also at many times been overwhelmed with a lot of work, and the approval process takes quite long for pharmaceuticals. It's getting better, but we still lag. The approved drugs in China are many fewer than approved drugs in Europe or in the US. But early on, there were some very essential drugs that weren't available here, some of which still aren't available here. There are people, for example, mothers with Rh negative blood need to have a certain kind of preventative therapy in order to be able to not reject their second pregnancy. And that drug is not available in China. So many people are able to either get it through their embassies or have to leave. The problem is that not many Chinese women are Rh negative, but our international patient base has many Rh negative women. And so we've, for example, one of the things we've been doing is championing the approval of that drug. Happily, many women can resolve it through their embassies.
How do you feel about Chinese medicine after all this time?
I'm a great believer in Chinese medicine. In fact, we've just bought a new hospital in Beijing, downtown, which is licensed to be a traditional Chinese medicine general hospital, which means we can provide both TCM and Western medicine there. We provide TCM services in all of our facilities. So we have acupuncture, we have Chinese medicine and Tuina, but we believe in team approach, multidisciplinary approach. So it's rare that a patient will just be getting TCM, but as an adjunct therapy, it's very common in our facilities. And I, for one, always take ganmao chungqi whenever I feel like I'm getting a cold. And TCM has solved some other problems for me. So I'm a great believer.
We talked a lot about the past. What's in the future for you?
For me, for our company, I can't really separate the two, but we feel like we've come up with a good thing. We feel like we have services that it's hard to get elsewhere in China, and we feel like we've been continually bringing new concepts and new ideas that have gotten referenced by the public system as well. So we're able to offer these new ideas and concepts to our patients, but at the same time, it's recognized that this is something that people like and gets replicated in public hospitals. I can give you some examples from this concept of family-centered childbirth, pain control in childbirth, having primary care doctor partnering with each one of our patients to help them make sure they keep healthy, to do preventive care on an ongoing basis with continuity through multi-generations. So these concepts of preventive care, primary care, multidisciplinary approach, pain control in childbirth, many, many things that really were not known in China that we feel we had a hand in bringing in and popularizing. We only can directly provide those services to people where we have facilities. Hopefully we impact the wider healthcare community to spread it more widely, but I think we have opportunity to continue developing United Family platforms in other cities in China. So we have a very big project that we're working on now, which will be our 5th hospital in Beijing, which is going to be a comprehensive facility, a greenfield build, which will have not only excellent general clinical care, but also will be a teaching facility and a research facility for translational medicine. So we'll be able to bring in more innovative concepts and more innovative therapies for people. So I'm really excited about that project. I'm really excited bringing United Family Care to more and more people. We've been integrating internet services, so that also spreads the availability and the access. So I feel like there's still a whole lot to do. We're really excited about getting more and more involved in medical education and nursing education. And so I feel like, we're kind of just beginning on what we can accomplish here.
Not slowing down.
No.
This is very inspiring. Thank you so much.